Those children are out of control." The scream shattered through the luxury penthouse, followed by crying, crashing, and the sound of small footsteps running wild like a storm breaking loose. 65 nannies had already quit. Some lasted a few days, some couldn't even survive a single morning, but not one of them had been prepared for two 4-year-old girls, the daughters of Vincent Moretti, the most feared mafia boss in New York. Sophia stood on top of an overturned leather chair, her tangled curls falling into her face, a pair of toy scissors clenched tightly in her tiny hand, while Isabella trembled behind her, still pushing expensive books off the shelves, as if destruction was the only language she had left. The room looked like a battlefield. "Please, Sophia, Isabella." The 65th nanny begged, her voice shaking, her body already halfway broken by fear. "We can talk. Just put the scissors down." No answer. Not a single word. Only the sharp sound of fabric tearing. Small, but cold enough to freeze an adult in place. She quit on the spot. At the end of the marble hallway, Vincent Moretti stood motionless in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. The man who made grown men kneel in fear could not control his own daughters. 65 people in 2 years. 65 trained professionals. Every single one of them had failed. Some said the girls were possessed. Some locked themselves in bathrooms and begged to leave. Some ran away within hours. But the truth was far worse. They weren't bad. They were breaking. 2 years ago, Sophia and Isabella had been the light of this home. They laughed. They ran. They threw themselves into their father's arms every night. Then their mother died. And from that day on, it wasn't just one person who disappeared. It was their entire childhood. Now they trusted no one, spoke to no one, needed no one. They destroyed everything, as if tearing the world apart might somehow make the pain smaller. Vin clenched his fists. He had money, power, an empire built on fear and control, but he couldn't make his daughters stop crying. "Sir, the agencies have blacklisted us." The butler's voice cut through the silence. All of them refused. A pause. Long, heavy, suffocating. At the same time, on the other side of the city, Emily Harper stood outside a shelter, her thin coat barely holding back the cold. 28 years old, no money, no home, no options left. She had just been rejected again, and she had stopped counting how many times. Not a cultural fit. A polite sentence for saying she didn't belong anywhere. Then an opportunity appeared. A powerful family. 2 children no one could control. A job where 65 others had already failed. The pay was enough to change her entire life. The cost was facing a storm no one had survived. "They're not difficult children," Emily whispered softly, almost to herself. "They're in pain." The next day she stood in front of a towering gate. On one side was power, wealth, and darkness. On the other side was her, with nothing left except one thing: understanding. She didn't know that the moment she stepped into that house, everything would change. 2 broken children would stop running. A powerful man would begin to fall apart, and a secret would destroy everything they thought was true. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in? And what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. Is it United States, London, maybe Canada, Jamaica, South Africa, or anywhere we want to know? And tell us what you learned at the end of this video. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. In the crisp autumn air of October 2025, the city that never sleeps stretched out beneath a slate-gray sky, its towering skyscrapers piercing the low clouds like silent sentinels. High above the bustling streets of Manhattan, in a sprawling penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, Vincent Moretti stood motionless at the floor-to-ceiling windows. The man known in certain circles as one of the most powerful and feared figures in New York's shadowed world gripped the edge of a marble countertop, his knuckles whitening. His fair skin, marked by faint lines of exhaustion around his sharp blue eyes, reflected the weight of countless sleepless nights. At 42 years old, Vin had built an empire through legitimate construction firms and hidden dealings that commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Yet none of that power could quiet the storm raging inside his chest. Down the long marble hallway, chaos echoed like a relentless storm. The high-pitched screams of 2 4-year-old girls sliced through the air, followed by the crash of toys scattering across the hardwood floors. Sophia and Isabella, his identical twin daughters, were in the middle of another outburst. Sophia, with her dark curls matted from restless sleep, and her small hands clutching a pair of safety scissors, stood atop the overturned leather ottoman. Isabella huddled nearby, her tiny frame shaking as she pushed over a stack of expensive picture books, their pages fluttering like wounded birds. The playroom, once a carefully designed haven filled with soft rugs and custom furniture, now looked like a battlefield of scattered building blocks, torn coloring pages, and a toppled easel with paint smeared across the walls. Vin's heart twisted violently. These were his girls, flesh and blood, the only pure light left in his darkened world since their mother had been taken from them 2 years earlier in a tragic accident. Or at least that was the story the world believed. In truth, the loss had carved a deep, gnawing guilt into his soul. He had not been there that night, buried instead in a tense meeting with rival factions fighting for control of key waterfront territories. The remorse consumed him daily. If I had protected her better, if I had chosen family over power just once, maybe they would still have their mother. The thought tore at him like invisible claws, leaving him breathless in quiet moments. Nanny number 65 had lasted less than 4 hours this time. The middle-aged woman now stood in the foyer, her coat clutched tightly to her chest, eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and fear. "Mr. Moretti, I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I tried everything. They won't eat, they won't sleep, and when I tried to calm them, they look at me like I'm the enemy." She glanced back toward the playroom where fresh cries erupted. "I can't do this anymore. No one can." Vin did not turn from the window at first. His broad shoulders, honed from years of disciplined control, rose and fell with a heavy breath. Inside, a violent emotional conflict raged. Part of him wanted to roar in frustration, to demand why these highly recommended professionals kept failing. Another part, the deeper hidden part, understood all too well. The twins had not been the same since the loss. Once joyful little girls who giggled during Friday pizza nights and begged for stories about brave American heroes, they had withdrawn into a silent hurricane of grief. They spoke little, trusted no one, and lashed out at every new caregiver with destructive energy that seemed endless. 65 nannies in 2 years. Some lasted days. One had fled after only 3 hours, claiming the house felt haunted by unspoken pain. The butler, an older loyal man named Mr. Ellis, escorted the departing nanny out with quiet efficiency, already preparing the wire transfer for double her fee and the standard confidentiality papers. Vin finally turned, his polished leather shoes clicking against the floor as he moved toward the playroom. The penthouse itself was a monument to wealth, sleek modern furniture, imported from Italy, original artwork on the walls worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, and a kitchen stocked with the finest ingredients. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over surfaces that gleamed from daily professional cleaning. Yet the opulence felt hollow, a cold shell around a family fracturing at its core. As Vin approached the doorway, Sophia spotted him first. She froze, scissors still in her small grip, her large dark eyes so much like her mother's, filling with a mix of defiance and deep, unspoken hurt. Isabella crawled behind an overturned chair, peeking out with tear-streaked cheeks. The sight struck Vin like a physical blow. His chest tightened with consuming remorse. They are only 4 years old. They should be laughing, not breaking everything in sight. I provide them everything money can buy. The best doctors, the safest home, endless toys. Yet I cannot give them back what they lost. What kind of father am I? The guilt gnawed deeper, a relentless ache that made his hands tremble slightly at his sides. He knelt slowly at the threshold, keeping distance so as not to overwhelm them. "Sophia, Isabella," his voice was deep and controlled, the same tone that made grown men in boardrooms or back alley meetings pause. But here it softened with raw vulnerability. "It is okay. I am here." The words felt inadequate even to him. The girls did not respond with words. Instead, Sophia snipped once more at a cushion, the soft tearing sound echoing like a tiny act of rebellion against a world that had already taken too much. Outside the penthouse, far below in the gritty streets of Brooklyn, another kind of storm brewed for a different soul. Emily Harper, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher and part-time community counselor, huddled in the doorway of a rundown shelter on a windswept corner. The October chill cut through her thin coat like icy knives. She had spent the previous night on a hard cot in the overcrowded facility, after her latest eviction notice had forced her out of the cramped studio apartment she could no longer afford. Her frame was painfully thin, from months of stretching meager paychecks between rent, school supplies for her students, and basic food. Dark circles shadowed her kind hazel eyes, and her light brown hair hung limp from lack of proper rest. Sleep had become a luxury she could rarely afford amid the constant worry of survival. Emily clutched a worn backpack containing her few belongings, a couple of threadbare sweaters, a notebook filled with lesson plans for her underfunded Brooklyn classroom, and a small, faded family photo of her late grandmother. Life had stripped her bare in ways that felt absurdly unfair. Raised in modest circumstances, she had worked tirelessly through college on scholarships and night jobs, only to watch her dreams of stability crumble under mounting medical bills from her grandmother's illness, and a string of unjust evictions driven by rising rents that outpaced any teacher's salary. Landlords had ignored repair requests for leaking roofs and faulty heating, leaving her enduring cold, wind-filled nights where the draft whistled through cracked windows. Food banks helped, but the lines were long and the portions small. She often went to bed with a hollow stomach, her body weak and malnourished. Today had brought fresh humiliation. At the school where she taught, budget cuts had eliminated her after-school counseling program for at-risk children, the very work that gave her purpose. Colleagues offered sympathetic looks, but no one could change the system that left dedicated educators like her scraping by. As she stood shivering, waiting for the shelter doors to reopen for evening intake, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The world tilted. She pressed a hand against the cold brick wall to steady herself. How much more can one person endure? Her inner turmoil swelled a confusing mix of fierce determination to keep helping her students and deep, numbing despair at her own powerlessness. She felt small, guarded, and utterly alone, yet a quiet resilience flickered beneath the exhaustion. Softly, almost to herself, she whispered a polite prayer her grandmother had taught her. "Give me strength for one more day." Unbeknownst to Emily, fate was already stirring in the upper echelons of the city. Vin's mother, a dignified woman in her late 60s who still carried the quiet strength of old New York families, had made discreet calls earlier that morning. She had watched her son and granddaughters spiral for too long. Through a community outreach program linking educators with families in crisis, she had learned of a young teacher known for her patience with grieving children. The recommendation came with urgency. The twins needed consistency, not another revolving door of strangers. Back in the penthouse, another tense confrontation unfolded on the streets, far below one of Vin's subtle reminders of the dangers surrounding his world. From his private security feed, he witnessed a brief charged encounter on a nearby block. Two men from a rival faction had approached one of his drivers, voices raised in heated but controlled words about territory lines and old agreements. No fists flew, but the air crackled with threat. Vin's jaw tightened as he watched his men de-escalate with firm presence rather than force. The incident sent a fresh surge of protective instinct through him. My girls cannot grow up in fear. I built this life to shield them. Yet the shadows keep creeping closer. His remorse intensified, blending with a fierce resolve to do better, to find real help before the empire he commanded swallowed what remained of his family. As evening light faded over the Hudson, painting the penthouse in hues of amber and gray, Vin sank into a leather armchair near the playroom door. Sophia had finally dropped the scissors and curled up on the floor, her small chest rising and falling in exhausted silence. Isabella edged closer to her sister, their identical faces etched with the same unspoken pain. Vin's eyes stung with unshed tears he refused to let fall. The inner conflict tore at him violently. The powerful man who commanded loyalty from hardened associates felt utterly helpless before two tiny girls who needed only love. He did not know how to give without breaking them further. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, with the city humming far below, Vin made a silent vow. He would try one more time, one more caregiver, one more chance to bring peace to his daughter's shattered world. Little did he know that help would arrive from the most unexpected place, a destitute young woman fighting her own battles on the unforgiving streets of Brooklyn, a woman whose quiet compassion might just reach the broken hearts in his gilded quay. The wind outside picked up, carrying the distant sounds of the city into the night. For Vin, the guilt and remorse churned like an unrelenting tide. For Emily, miles away, the cold bit deeper as she finally stepped into the shelter line, her steps heavy with fatigue and quiet dignity. Two lives separated by vast chasms of wealth and circumstance stood on the brink of an intersection. Neither could yet imagine, one defined by power laced with profound regret, the other by poverty laced with resilient hope. The October 2025 wind howled through the narrow Brooklyn alleys, carrying with it the sharp bite of early winter that seemed determined to punish those already on their knees. In the dim glow of a flickering street lamp outside the overcrowded shelter, Emily Harper sat huddled on a cracked concrete step, her thin coat pulled tightly around her frail shoulders. At 28 years old, she looked far older under the weight of endless hardship. Her once bright hazel eyes were dulled by exhaustion, and her light brown hair fell in limp strands across a face hollowed by months of barely eating. She had not had a full meal in 3 days, just scraps from the shelter kitchen and whatever she could stretch from her last paycheck. The cold seeped into her bones, numbing her fingers and sending sharp pains through her malnourished frame. Sleep had become a distant memory. The shelter cots were hard, the nights filled with coughing strangers, and the constant fear of theft. She endured wind-filled nights like this, one after another, her body weak and trembling, yet her spirit clung desperately to a quiet resilience that refused to die completely. Inside her chest, a storm of emotions raged with increasing violence. Why does everything keep being taken away? The thought tore at her like invisible hands, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. One moment she felt deep, numbing despair. The next, a confusing surge of guarded curiosity about whether tomorrow might finally bring relief. She was powerless, utterly destitute, and the unfairness of it all felt absurdly cruel. Just last week, the school board had cut her after-school program without warning, citing budget shortfalls, while administrators drove home to warm houses in better neighborhoods. Her students, children from families even poorer than hers, had looked at her with tearful eyes, asking why she could no longer stay late to help them with their grief and homework. The humiliation burned, standing in line for food assistance, only to be told the supplies had run out early, or facing a landlord who laughed off her polite pleas for more time on rent. Each unjust blow stripped her bare, exposing the raw torment within. In quiet moments of stillness, she would close her eyes and whisper softly to herself, her voice timid and polite even in solitude. Just hold on a little longer. Miles away in the glowing warmth of the Manhattan penthouse, Vincent Moretti moved like a shadow through his opulent domain. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over rooms filled with treasures. Most people could only dream of handcrafted Italian furniture. Original paintings worth entire fortunes and a private study lined with rare books and sleek monitors, displaying his vast construction empire. Wealth poured from every corner, the soft Persian rugs underfoot, the temperature-controlled wine cellar stocked with bottles older than his daughters, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the glittering city lights. Yet none of it brought comfort. Vin's fair-skinned face, strong-jawed and marked by the quiet lines of a man who carried too much, reflected the deepening torment in his heart. He stood in the doorway of the twins' bedroom, watching Sophia and Isabella sleep fitfully in their custom canopy beds. The 4-year-old girls clutched worn stuffed animals, a faded eagle for Sophia and a small bear for Isabella, their small chests rising and falling in uneasy rhythm. 2 years earlier, their mother had been taken in what the official reports called a tragic car accident. Only Vin knew the darker truth: the crash had been no accident. It was the shadow of his world reaching out to claim what he loved most. The remorse gnawed at him relentlessly, a violent conflict tearing his soul apart. I should have been there. I chose one more meeting, one more deal to secure their future, and instead I lost her. Now my girls pay the price every single day. Guilt consumed him like fire, making his broad shoulders slump under the invisible weight. He was a powerful man, respected and feared in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Yet he felt utterly powerless before his own children's pain. The twins had once filled these halls with laughter. They would beg for Friday pizza nights, their tiny voices ringing as they helped spread sauce on dough and demanded extra cheese. They played catch with an old baseball glove in the private rooftop garden, their giggles echoing against the skyline. Now silence and destruction reigned. Sophia and Isabella had not smiled genuinely in nearly 2 years. They trusted no one, spoke rarely, and lashed out at every new face with a hurricane of grief that no amount of money could calm. 65 caregivers had come and gone, each one defeated by the quiet storm in the girl's eyes. Vin's inner turmoil intensified with every memory. The remorse was so deep it left him numb at times, then violently ripping at his chest until he could barely breathe. They look at me and see only absence. I provide them the world, the best tutors, the safest security, endless comforts, yet I cannot give them the one thing they need: a father who knows how to heal their hearts. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Ellis entered quietly, his face etched with concern. "Sir, there has been another incident on the street. 2 men from Marco's faction were spotted near the warehouse on the waterfront. They made veiled threats about territory lines, but our team de-escalated without incident. Still, the tension is rising." Vin's jaw tightened, his blue eyes flashing with a mix of calculated control and raw frustration. Marco, his ambitious underboss, had grown bolder in recent months, pushing for riskier operations and questioning Vin's focus on family. The rivalry simmered like an undercurrent, creating tense, unexpected confrontations on city streets where words carried the weight of potential danger. Just yesterday, Vin had faced a bold encounter in a dimly lit parking garage, Marco's men blocking his car, their voices low and challenging, as they demanded more aggressive moves into rival territories. Vin had stood tall, his powerful presence alone diffusing the moment with firm commands and a quiet warning. No violence erupted, but the air had crackled with threat, leaving him with a fresh wave of protective fury. I built this empire to shield my daughters, yet the shadows keep closing in. If Marco senses weakness, he will strike harder. The conflict inside Vin grew more violent, remorse for past choices blending with fierce determination to protect what remained of his family. He turned back to the sleeping girls, his heart aching with deeper intensity. In the stillness of the room, a single tear escaped his control, tracing a path down his fair cheek. The emotional tearing was almost unbearable love for his daughters, warred with the gnawing guilt that he had failed them as a father. He whispered softly into the quiet, his voice rough with unspoken pain. "I will find a way. I promise." Across the city, Emily's night took another absurdly unfair turn. The shelter had reached capacity earlier than expected, and despite her polite, timid pleas, her voice soft and respectful as she addressed the older volunteer, she was turned away with a sympathetic but firm shrug. "We're full tonight, dear. Try the one on the next block." The wind whipped harder as she stepped back into the street, her thin frame shivering uncontrollably. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and a wave of dizziness made the world spin. She leaned against a cold lamppost, fighting numbness in her limbs, and the deep disorientation that came from pure exhaustion. "How is this fair? I work every day helping children who have nothing, yet I have even less." Tears stung her eyes as humiliation washed over her, sleeping in doorways, enduring the pitying glances of passers-by, her body growing weaker with each passing night of cold and hunger. The inner torment escalated, confusing and numbing violently, tearing at her resolve until she felt on the edge of breaking. Yet in that moment of condensed emotional stillness, as she clutched her worn backpack and stared at the distant Manhattan skyline, a flicker of curiosity stirred. She wondered about the families she could no longer help at school, about the children who needed someone to simply sit with their grief. Her voice came out in a soft, timid whisper to the empty street. There has to be a way to keep going. Unseen forces were already moving to bridge their worlds. Vin's mother, sitting in the penthouse's elegant sitting room surrounded by fresh flowers and antique furniture that spoke of generational wealth, had made quiet arrangements through the community program. She had heard of a young teacher whose patience with grieving children was spoken of with quiet admiration. The recommendation carried urgency the twins needed more than another stranger. They needed someone who understood real pain. Vin, unaware of the approaching change, felt the weight of his remorse intensify as he watched over his daughters. The disparity between his life of luxury and the suffering he could not ease for his own children created a violent inner conflict. He was wealthy beyond measure, powerful enough to command loyalty across the city, yet emotionally adrift in guilt and love. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the October wind continued its relentless howl outside, both Vin and Emily stood at the precipice of transformation. One trapped in a golden cage of remorse, the other enduring the raw, humiliating edge of poverty. The city slept uneasily, its lights twinkling like distant stars. For Vin, the gnawing torment grew heavier with every breath. For Emily, the cold night brought fresh waves of anxiety and guarded hope. Their paths, though separated by vast chasms of wealth and circumstance, were drawing closer through invisible threads of fate, threads that would soon weave together in a story of compassion, protection, and the profound healing of a father's wounded heart through the innocent needs of his vulnerable children. October 2025 continued its unrelenting grip on New York City, the autumn leaves swirling in bitter gusts that seemed to mock anyone daring to hope for warmth. In the heart of Brooklyn, Emily Harper stood outside a dimly lit community center, her thin frame trembling against the wind that cut through her threadbare coat like invisible blades. The shelter had turned her away again the previous night, citing sudden policy changes and overcrowding, leaving her to spend the hours huddled in a deserted bus stop where the cold metal bench offered no comfort. Her body was painfully thin ribs, visible beneath her worn sweater cheeks, hollow from weeks of surviving on little more than stale bread and water from public fountains. Sleep deprivation had etched dark circles under her hazel eyes, and every step sent waves of dizziness through her, making the world tilt and blur. Hunger gnawed constantly at her stomach, a humiliating reminder of her powerlessness. She was destitute in the most absolute sense. No savings, no family to turn to, and no safety net left after a string of absurdly unfair events. A delayed paycheck from the school that never arrived, a landlord who changed the locks without proper notice, and a food bank line that stretched for blocks, only to run out of supplies before her turn came. Emily clutched her worn backpack, closer, her fingers numb from the cold. In quiet moments of condensed emotional stillness, she would pause on street corners staring at the distant, glittering lights of Manhattan and whisper softly to herself in a timid, polite voice meant for no one but the wind, Just one more day. Please let me find a way. Yet the inner tearing grew increasingly intense. One moment she felt deep, numbing despair that left her legs weak and her balance unsteady. The next, a confusing surge of guarded fear, mixed with faint curiosity about whether help could possibly exist for someone like her. The unfairness was crushing, watching wealthier colleagues leave school each day for warm homes and full dinners, while she returned to uncertainty and hunger. Her spirit once Buddha. Desire to help grieving children now flickered under the weight of her own silent suffering. Horror at her situation washed over her in waves, leaving her disoriented and filled with anxiety. How did everything fall apart so completely? I only wanted to teach and care for the little ones who had lost so much. Meanwhile, in the soaring Manhattan penthouse, bathed in the soft glow of crystal chandeliers and warmed by underfloor heating, Vincent Moretti paced the length of his private study. The room spoke of immense wealth and power walls, lined with rare first-edition books, a massive oak desk imported from Europe, and monitors displaying live feeds from his legitimate construction empire that spanned the city. Expensive leather armchairs and a fully stocked bar of aged spirits completed the picture of a man who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Yet Vin's fair-skinned face was drawn with exhaustion, his sharp blue eyes shadowed by the violent emotional conflict tearing through his heart. The remorse from his past choices gnawed at him without mercy. I failed their mother. I chose deals and power over being present, and now my girls are paying for my mistakes every single day. The guilt was so deep it left him numb in quiet moments, then violently ripped at his chest until breathing became difficult. He had spent the morning in tense preparation. His mother seated gracefully in the adjacent sitting room, surrounded by fresh flowers and antique vases worth small fortunes, had insisted on action. Vincent, you cannot keep watching them suffer. The community program I contacted has found someone, a young teacher known for her work with children who carry heavy grief. She understands loss in ways money cannot buy. Vin stopped pacing, his broad shoulders tensing. The idea of bringing another stranger into their home filled him with fierce inner conflict. 65 caregivers had already failed. Each departure had deepened the twins' withdrawal, turning their once bright eyes into pools of silent accusation. Sophia and Isabella deserved better than another revolving door. Yet his love for them burned with overwhelming intensity, a passionate, protective force that made his heart ache with every cry he could not soothe. In that moment, his emotions toward the unknown woman shifted with surprising force. From initial suspicion about her ability to handle his world's dangers, a deep, burning attachment began to form in his mind. He imagined someone who might finally reach his daughters. And the thought stirred something profound and protective within him, a fierce upheaval that blended hope with the gnawing remorse that he had not been enough on his own. If she can help them heal even a little, I will move mountains to keep her safe. The emotional response was intense and immediate, creating a compelling focal point amid his turmoil. A sudden alert on his phone pulled him from his thoughts. One of his trusted drivers reported a bold street confrontation unfolding near the waterfront warehouse. 2 men from Marco's rival faction had appeared unexpectedly, blocking a delivery truck with their vehicles. Voices had risen in tense, challenging tones about disputed territory lines and accusations of weakness in Vin's operations. Vin's men had responded with firm presence and calm authority, de-escalating the situation without any physical escalation, but the air had crackled with unspoken threat. Marco's shadow loomed larger each day, pushing for riskier moves that Vin resisted to protect his family. The encounter left Vin with heightened suspense and a fresh wave of protective fury. They sense my distraction with the girls. If I appear weak, they will strike harder. The inner conflict escalated remorse for past absences, blending with a violent determination to shield his daughters from the dangers he had created. Back in Brooklyn, Emily's day took yet another absurdly unfair turn. She had arrived at the community center, hoping for any lead on temporary work, only to learn that the after-school counseling position she had been promised was suddenly given to someone with more connections. The coordinator offered a sympathetic shrug, citing budget constraints and last-minute changes from higher administration. Emily stood there, her voice soft and timid, as she addressed the older woman. "Thank you for your time. I understand." But inside, the news struck like a physical blow. Shock and confusion washed over her, causing a wave of dizziness that made her grip the counter for balance. Numbness spread through her limbs as humiliation burned deep. She was left standing in the cold once more, powerless and desperate, her malnourished body protesting with sharp pains. The disparity felt brutally real. While some lived in penthouses with every comfort, she endured windswept nights and empty stomachs. Her quiet dignity the only thing keeping her from breaking completely. In a rare moment of condensed emotional stillness, Emily found a bench in a small park and sat watching leaves dance in the wind. Her guarded heart flickered with fearful curiosity. What if there was still a path forward? What if someone somewhere needed the very patience she had cultivated through her own losses? She whispered politely to the empty air, her voice barely above the breeze. Please, show me a way to keep helping. Unseen connections were already forming. Vin's mother had received the profile from the community outreach program that very morning. The young teacher's background spoke of genuine compassion, forged in hardship, exactly what the twins might need. She had forwarded the details to Vin with quiet insistence, sensing that this could be the turning point her son and granddaughters desperately required. Vin returned to the playroom where Sophia and Isabella sat amid scattered toys, their small faces etched with the same quiet grief that mirrored his own inner torment. He knelt at a distance, his powerful frame humbled by love. The girls did not look up, but Sophia clutched her faded stuffed eagle a little tighter. The sight intensified Vin's remorse to a nearly unbearable degree. They are only 4. They should be carefree, not carrying the weight of loss I helped create. His heart tore violently between the man he had become in the streets and the father he longed to be. Yet woven through the guilt was that new burning emotional upheaval, a deep, protective attachment forming toward the unknown woman who might bring light into their darkness. From the first mention of her name, suspicion had given way to an intense, passionate hope that she could succeed where others had failed. He would ensure her safety no matter the cost. The thought filled him with a fierce resolve that clashed with his ongoing remorse, creating a profound inner storm. As the October afternoon faded into early evening, the city lights began to sparkle across the skyline. Emily made her way slowly toward another shelter line, her steps heavy with fatigue and quiet anxiety. The wind picked up again, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and life continuing without mercy. For Vin, the penthouse felt both a fortress of wealth and a prison of guilt. His love for his daughters driving him toward a decision that could change everything. For Emily, the streets offered only more uncertainty. Her pitiful circumstances, highlighting the vast gulf between their worlds. Yet threads of fate were tightening. A single recommendation born from desperation on both sides was about to draw their paths together. One man's powerful remorse meeting one woman's resilient compassion in a story centered on healing, protection, and the deep, emotional bond between a father and the vulnerable children who needed him most. New York City, as if the season itself conspired to expose every vulnerability. In a quiet corner of Brooklyn, Emily Harper stood before the community center once more, her thin frame swaying slightly from another sleepless night spent on a park bench, when the shelter doors closed early due to an unexpected inspection. Her coat hung loosely on her malnourished body, the fabric worn thin from years of mending with whatever thread she could find. Hunger had become a constant companion, leaving her stomach cramped and her steps unsteady. The dizziness returned in waves, causing a deep disorientation that made the sidewalk blur and her balance falter. She pressed a trembling hand against the brick wall, fighting the numbness that spread through her limbs. The humiliation was profound. A young woman who poured her heart into teaching children, now reduced to begging for any opportunity. Her voice soft and timid as she had politely thanked the coordinator earlier, only to learn the position had vanished overnight due to further budget cuts. The unfairness struck with violent intensity. Just hours earlier, she had waited in a long line for emergency assistance, only to be turned away because her paperwork was deemed incomplete by a new rule implemented without warning. Tears had stung her eyes as she walked away empty-handed, the wind whipping her light brown hair across her hollow cheeks. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness, Emily whispered to herself in a polite, respectful tone, "I will keep trying. There must be something." Yet inside, confusion and fear churned, blending with guarded curiosity about whether her life could ever change. The inner tearing grew more intense, numbing her spirit one moment and ripping through her with sharp anxiety the next. She felt utterly powerless, a destitute soul enduring cold, wind-filled nights that left her body aching and her hope flickering like a candle in a storm. Unbeknownst to her, fate was moving swiftly across the river in Manhattan. In the opulent penthouse where marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the air carried the faint scent of fresh flowers arranged daily by staff, Vincent Moretti sat in his private study. The room radiated wealth and power, a massive desk of polished mahogany walls, adorned with valuable art pieces and large windows, offering a commanding view of the glittering skyline. Vin's legitimate construction empire generated fortunes, allowing him every luxury while his hidden influence commanded respect across the city. Yet his fair-skinned face showed the strain of deepening torment. The gnawing remorse over his daughter's suffering clawed at him relentlessly. "I have given them everything money can buy, yet their eyes still carry the pain I could not prevent." The violent emotional conflict inside him escalated, blending fierce love for Sophia and Isabella with consuming guilt that left him breathless in quiet moments. His mother entered the study with quiet grace, holding a simple folder. The community program has recommended her strongly, Vincent. Emily Harper is a teacher who has worked with many grieving children. She understands loss from her own life. The twins need someone who sees their pain, not just manages it. Vin rose slowly, his powerful frame filling the space. Suspicion flickered first. Could any outsider truly handle the shadows surrounding his world? But as his mother spoke of Emily's dedication, something shifted with overwhelming force. From that initial wariness, a deep, passionate attachment began to burn in his chest, an intense, protective upheaval that surprised even him. He imagined a woman who might reach his daughters where others had failed, and the emotion surged like a tide, fierce and immediate. If she can bring them even a moment of peace, I will protect her with everything I have. This emotional response created a compelling focal point amid his inner storm clashing violently with his remorse, and heightening the tearing in his heart. He was a man of immense power, yet the thought of this unknown woman stirred a profound sense of responsibility and quiet hope. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated with an urgent message. One of his drivers reported a tense, unexpected confrontation on a side street near the warehouse district. Marco's associates had appeared suddenly, their vehicles pulling alongside in a bold show of presence. Words were exchanged in low, challenging tones about shifting alliances, and perceived hesitation in Vin's leadership. Vin's team responded with calm authority, maintaining distance and de-escalating through firm negotiation rather than force. The encounter ended without incident, but the suspense lingered, underscoring the rival factions' growing boldness. Vin's jaw tightened, the inner conflict intensifying. They watch for any sign of distraction. My focus on the girls must not become weakness. The remorse deepened, tearing at him with fresh violence as he thought of how his choices continued to ripple outward. Later that afternoon, arrangements were made swiftly. Emily received a polite but urgent call from the community program coordinator. There is a family in need of someone with your experience in supporting children through grief. The position is live-in with generous compensation and housing provided. They would like to meet you today. Emily's heart raced with a mix of horror and heightened curiosity. Her voice came out soft and timid when she responded to the older coordinator. Thank you. I will come right away. Shock and confusion washed over her as she hung up, causing a wave of dizziness that nearly made her lose her balance. A live-in position. For a family that can afford such things, the prospect felt unreal, stirring guarded fear alongside desperate hope. She smoothed her worn clothes as best she could, and made her way to the address, riding the subway in silence. Her thin frame pressed among strangers while her mind spun with anxiety and numb disbelief. When she arrived at the towering Manhattan building, the disparity struck her like a physical force. The lobby alone spoke of unimaginable wealth. Polished marble, fresh floral arrangements, and attentive staff who greeted her with professional kindness. An elevator whisked her upward to the penthouse level. Mr. Ellis, the loyal butler, met her at the private entrance and led her through halls lined with exquisite art and comfortable yet elegant furnishings. The warmth inside contrasted brutally with the cold nights she had endured, amplifying her sense of humiliation and powerlessness. In a quiet moment of emotional stillness, as she waited, Emily felt tears prick her eyes. How can such beauty exist while others freeze outside? Vin waited in his study, the space even more imposing up close. When Emily entered, her steps hesitant, he rose to greet her. His blue eyes met her hazel ones, and the emotional upheaval surged again, that burning attachment from the first moment, intense and protective, blending with his ongoing remorse. He saw the signs of her hardship in her thin frame and tired eyes, and something fierce stirred within him, a passionate resolve to shield her if she proved able to help his daughters. Miss Harper, he said, his deep voice controlled yet laced with quiet intensity. Thank you for coming on short notice. Emily's voice was soft and polite as she addressed the older, powerful man before her. Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I am grateful to be here. Inside, fear and curiosity warred violently. She felt disoriented by the luxury surrounding her, a dizzying contrast to her own reality. The inner tearing escalated the mindset of someone who had known only scarcity, now facing sudden possibility, left her numb and overwhelmed. They spoke of the twins' situation. Vin described their grief with raw honesty, his remorse evident in every measured word. The conversation turned tense when he warned of the challenges ahead, his protective instincts flaring. Another alert interrupted briefly, a report of Marco's men making another bold approach on a construction site, voices raised in challenging questions about Vin's priorities. The confrontation de-escalated through steady leadership, but it heightened the suspense. reminding Vin of the dangers that could touch anyone close to him. As the meeting concluded, Vin felt the violent inner conflict peak. His love for his daughters drove him to take this chance, while the new burning attachment toward Emily created profound upheaval suspicion, giving way to deep trust and a fierce desire to protect her from the world's cruelties. For Emily, the encounter left her in shock and confusion, her guarded heart opening slightly to curious hope amid the numbing disparity of wealth and poverty. In the quiet aftermath, as Emily was shown to a temporary waiting area filled with soft lighting and comfortable seating, she sat in condensed emotional stillness. The unfair events of her life felt momentarily suspended, yet the inner storm continued to tear at both souls, one man's remorse and protective passion meeting one woman's resilient desperation. The path ahead remained uncertain, but the first threads of connection had formed in that tense meeting, centered on compassion and the profound need for healing between a powerful father and his vulnerable children. October 2025 lingered with its crisp, unforgiving chill, as if the city itself held its breath for the fragile moments unfolding high above its streets. In the Manhattan penthouse, where sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows onto gleaming marble and soft Persian rugs, Emily Harper followed Mr. Ellis down the wide hallway toward the playroom. Her thin frame still carried the marks of extreme poverty, malnourished and sleep-deprived. Her steps slightly unsteady from another night of cold wind that had left her huddled in a doorway after yet another shelter turned her away without explanation. The disparity struck her anew with every elegant detail she passed. Crystal vases filled with fresh flowers, original artwork worth small fortunes, and the faint aroma of a gourmet meal being prepared in the expansive kitchen. Her own reality days of hunger, nights of shivering in thin layers, and the humiliating sting of rejection after rejection made the luxury feel almost dreamlike, triggering waves of dizziness and deep disorientation. She paused for a moment, pressing a hand to the wall as numbness spread through her limbs, her voice a soft, timid whisper to herself. "This cannot be real. Stay calm." Vin stood a short distance away in the shadowed doorway of his study, watching her approach. His powerful presence filled the space, broad shoulders framed by a tailored shirt that spoke of quiet authority and immense wealth. The moment his eyes met hers, the emotional upheaval surged again, with burning intensity, that passionate, protective attachment from the very first meeting now flaring into something deeper and more profound. Suspicion had long since melted into overwhelming trust, and a fierce, almost overwhelming desire to shield her from the hardships etched so clearly on her face. She has endured so much, yet she came. If she can reach my girls, I will ensure she never faces another cold night or empty plate. The inner conflict tore at him, violently blending, gnawing remorse for his own failures as a father, with this new intense emotional response that left his chest tight and his breath unsteady. He remained silent, observing his heart a battlefield of love for his daughters, and this sudden compelling pull toward the woman who might heal them. Emily entered the playroom with hesitant steps. The space was vast and beautifully appointed. Soft lighting from elegant fixtures, custom shelves lined with toys and books, and large windows offering views of the sparkling Hudson River. Yet chaos reigned. Toys were scattered like fallen leaves after a storm, cushions torn open with stuffing spilling out, and colorful drawings ripped into fragments across the floor. In the center sat Sophia and Isabella, the 4-year-old identical twins, their dark curls disheveled and their small faces etched with exhaustion and unspoken pain. Sophia clutched a pair of child-safe scissors tightly, while Isabella pushed over a stack of blocks with quiet defiance. They had not smiled in nearly 2 years, their grief, a silent hurricane that had defeated 65 caregivers before her. Emily's heart squeezed with a mix of horror and heightened curiosity. She felt a rush of anxiety, her malnourished body trembling slightly as dizziness threatened to overwhelm her. This was no ordinary room, it was a battlefield of tiny hearts breaking. In a moment of condensed emotional stillness, she chose not to announce herself loudly or try to impose order. Instead, she moved slowly to the edge of the room and sat down on the soft rug, her thin legs folding beneath her. From her worn backpack, she pulled out a simple, well-loved baseball glove, an old American keepsake she had carried from her own childhood, scuffed and faded but full of memories of simple catch games in the park. She placed it gently on the floor beside her and began playing soft folk songs from her phone, the gentle acoustic melodies filling the air like a quiet lullaby. The twins froze. Sophia's eyes narrowed with suspicion, her small hands tightening on the scissors. Isabella edged closer to her sister, peeking out with guarded fear. Emily did not speak at first. She simply sat there, her posture open and non-threatening her voice when she finally murmured, remaining soft and polite as if addressing someone much older and wiser than herself. "It is all right if you do not want to talk. I am just going to sit here for a while." Vin watched from the doorway unseen, his powerful frame tense with anticipation. The sight of Emily choosing patience over control sent another wave of intense emotional upheaval through him. His remorse for the twins' pain clashed violently with the burning attachment he felt toward this resilient woman, a protective love that had ignited from the first moment, and now grew fiercer with every gentle action she took. She understands without being told. She sees them. The inner tearing escalated, leaving him numb one moment and filled with fierce hope the next. Minutes stretched in quiet stillness. Then Sophia moved. She stood slowly, her tiny legs unsteady, and approached Emily with cautious steps. The little girl stopped a few feet away, staring at the worn baseball glove. With a sudden impulsive motion, she picked up her torn stuffed eagle, its wing frayed and one eye missing, and placed it carefully in Emily's lap. It was not a throw of anger, but a tentative offering. Emily looked at the damaged toy, then at Sophia, her voice soft and kind. "Thank you for sharing him with me. He looks like he has been through a lot, but he is still very brave." Sophia's lower lip trembled. Isabella crept closer, curiosity winning over fear. Emily continued speaking gently, sharing a simple story about how her own grandmother had once fixed a broken baseball glove with tape and patience, turning it into something even stronger for playing catch under summer skies. The words were not lectures or demands, they were quiet bridges of understanding. The folk song played on its melody, wrapping around the room like a warm blanket. The breakthrough came without warning. Sophia's small hand reached out and touched the baseball glove. Then in a whisper so faint it barely carried, she spoke her first words to anyone outside her sister in nearly 2 years. "It is broken. Like me." The admission hung in the air, raw and heartbreaking. Tears filled her dark eyes, and before Emily could respond, Sophia climbed into her lap, burying her face in the thin fabric of Emily's sweater. Isabella followed moments later, the 2 girls clinging to the kind stranger as deep, wrenching sobs shook their tiny bodies. They cried for the mother they had lost, for the nights filled with fear, and for the pain they had carried alone. Emily wrapped her arms around them, gently rocking slightly as the sobs continued. She did not shush them or tell them to stop. She simply held them, her own eyes stinging with unshed tears. The moment was one of profound, condensed emotional stillness amid the earlier chaos, a breakthrough forged in patience and genuine connection. Vin remained frozen in the doorway, unseen, witnessing everything. The scene struck him with extreme psychological shock. His powerful heart tore violently between overwhelming joy at seeing his daughters finally release their grief and crushing remorse that he had not been able to reach them himself. Tears burned in his own eyes as the burning attachment toward Emily intensified to a passionate, protective blaze. From the very first moment he had felt that pull, it now consumed him with fierce intensity. A deep, emotional upheaval that made him vow silently to protect this woman who had succeeded where wealth and power had failed. "She did what I could not. She gave them safety in her arms." The inner conflict raged, gnawing guilt blending with profound gratitude and a love for his daughters that felt almost overwhelming in its purity. Outside the penthouse, another tense confrontation unfolded on the streets far below. Marco's men had made another bold approach near one of Vin's construction sites, their vehicles pulling up unexpectedly to question deliveries and hint at shifting loyalties. Vin's team handled the situation with calm firmness, words exchanged in measured tones that carried underlying threat, but never escalated beyond presence and authority. The encounter heightened the suspense surrounding Vin's world, reminding him that any softness could be seen as weakness. Yet in this moment, watching Emily with his daughters, he felt only strengthened resolve. For Emily holding the sobbing twins brought a whirlwind of emotions. The luxury surrounding her highlighted her own pitiful state, thin, exhausted, and once powerless on cold streets, now suddenly in a position of quiet trust. The mindset of someone who had known only scarcity, now facing this overwhelming acceptance, created violent inner conflict. Shock, confusion, and a deep, numbing disorientation mixed with curious hope. Her voice remained soft and polite as she murmured comforting words to the girls, but inside tears of her own fell silently for the children and for the unexpected kindness being shown to her. As the sobs gradually quieted, the playroom settled into peaceful stillness. Sophia clutched the baseball glove tightly, and Isabella rested her head against Emily's shoulder. Vin stepped back silently, his heart forever changed by the breakthrough he had witnessed. The emotional rhythm of the day, from desperate poverty and gnawing remorse to this tender connection, had shifted something profound in all of them. In the quiet that followed, with the October light softening across the Hudson, the first true threads of healing began to weave between a powerful father's wounded heart and the innocent needs of his vulnerable children, guided by the gentle compassion of a woman who had known hardship herself. In the grand penthouse, days began to take on a gentler rhythm. Emily Harper moved through the sunlit rooms with quiet care, her thin frame still bearing the visible scars of extreme poverty. Even now, after several nights in the warm, luxurious guest quarters with its soft bedding and private bath, her body remembered the many cold, wind-filled nights on park benches and sheltered doorways. She remained malnourished and sleep-deprived, her cheeks hollow and her movements occasionally unsteady from lingering exhaustion. The disparity between her past and present felt surreal and humiliating. While the penthouse offered every comfort, heated marble floors, fresh gourmet meals prepared by a private chef, and closets filled with soft new clothing provided without fanfare, Emily often caught herself hesitating before touching anything, as if the luxury might vanish like a cruel dream. Waves of dizziness still swept over her at unexpected moments, leaving her numb and disoriented, her voice dropping to a soft, timid whisper when she spoke to Mr. Ellis or the household staff. "Thank you. I am very grateful." The twins, Sophia and Isabella, had begun to change in small but profound ways. They ate full meals for the first time in months, homemade apple pie and warm soup that Emily prepared with simple, comforting recipes from her own limited childhood. They slept through the night when she sang soft American folk lullabies, the same melodies she once used in her underfunded Brooklyn classroom. Laughter, fragile and tentative, emerged during quiet games of catch, with the old baseball glove in the rooftop garden, their small hands reaching out with growing trust. Sophia often carried the repaired stuffed eagle everywhere, while Isabella started adding colorful drawings to a family scrapbook Emily had gently introduced. These moments of condensed emotional stillness filled the once chaotic playroom with a fragile peace. Vin observed it all from the edges, his powerful frame moving silently through the opulent halls lined with valuable art and bathed in the glow of crystal chandeliers. His wealth was displayed with increasing intensity. The private gym overlooking the Hudson, the temperature-controlled library filled with rare books, and the seamless security that kept the outside world at bay. Yet inside, his heart tore with ever greater violence. The gnawing remorse over his absence during his daughter's greatest pain had not lessened. It had deepened into a consuming ache. "They are healing, and it is because of her. I provided everything money could buy, yet I could not give them this." The inner conflict raged fiercely, blending fierce paternal love with violent self-reproach that left him breathless in quiet moments. Woven through it was the burning attachment toward Emily, an overwhelming X-less intuigs, passionate trust that had ignited from the very first meeting, and now flared hotter with every gentle act she performed. He felt a profound protective upheaval whenever he saw her with the girls, a deep emotional response that made him vow silently to shield her from any further hardship. The mindset of watching someone who had endured such poverty now surrounded by safety created an intense highlight of inner turmoil for Vin, his remorse and gratitude clashing until his chest felt raw. One afternoon, as golden light poured through the tall windows, Emily brought a new presence into the penthouse. Mia, a 5-year-old girl from her old Brooklyn neighborhood, arrived for a short visit arranged through the community program. Mia was street-smart and loyal, with bright eyes that had already seen too much hardship. She was the twins' best friend from the days when Emily had run informal after-school sessions in the park. Mia clutched a small backpack and eyed the luxurious surroundings with open suspicion. The introduction began in the playroom. Sophia and Isabella lit up at the sight of their friend rushing forward with tentative hugs. Emily watched with a soft smile, her voice polite and gentle as she addressed the older staff member nearby. Mia has known the girls for a long time. It might help them feel even more at home. But Mia hung back at first, her small arms crossed. She stared at Vin when he entered the room, her voice sharp with the distrust born of a difficult life. "He looks scary, like the men who yell in the projects. Don't trust him too much, okay?" The words created immediate tension, a misunderstanding that hung heavy in the air. Sophia and Isabella glanced between Mia and their father, confusion flickering across their faces. Vin felt the remark like a quiet blow. It heightened his inner tearing. The powerful man who commanded respect on the streets now seen as frightening by a child from the very world he tried to rise above. Remorse surged violently, reminding him of the shadows his choices had cast. Yet his attachment to Emily only intensified in that moment, a passionate, protective instinct rising as he watched her calmly mediate. He knelt at a distance, his deep voice calm. "You are right to be careful, Mia, but I want only good things for Sophia and Isabella, and for anyone they care about." The drama escalated quietly, but intensely throughout the afternoon. Mia's distrust led to a small but painful misunderstanding when the girls repeated her words in innocent whispers. Emily felt a rush of anxiety and fear, her malnourished body trembling as dizziness returned. The unfairness of her situation struck again. Even in this place of safety, her past life intruded, exposing her utter misery and the violent inner torment of suddenly being lifted from poverty while carrying the weight of old suspicions. She sat in a moment of condensed emotional stillness by the window, fighting numbness and disorientation, her soft voice murmuring politely to herself, "They are only protecting their hearts, just like I once did." Another absurdly unfair blow came later that same day. A call from her former school arrived while she was helping the children with scrapbooking. The administrator informed her coldly that her final paycheck had been delayed indefinitely due to new administrative reviews despite months of dedicated service. The news left Emily reeling in shock and confusion, her legs nearly giving way as pain shot through her weakened frame. The contrast was brutal. Surrounded by the penthouse's increasing displays of wealth, the chef-prepared snacks, the soft blankets, the sense of security, she was reminded once more of her powerlessness and the humiliating reality she had barely escaped. Vin witnessed the quiet distress on her face and felt his own heart rip with greater intensity. His remorse over his daughter's past pain now intertwined with a fierce, burning desire to protect Emily from any further suffering. The emotional upheaval was profound suspicion long gone, replaced by an overwhelming attachment that made every hardship she had endured feel like a personal wound to him. In the stillness that followed, he made discreet arrangements to resolve the paycheck issue through quiet channels, though he kept his involvement hidden for now. Meanwhile, on the streets far below, tension with opposing factions continued to build. Vin received reports of two bold, unexpected confrontations that day. First, Marco's associates appeared near a construction site, their vehicles pulling alongside workers in a show of presence while questioning schedules and hinting at divided loyalties. Voices rose in measured but challenging tones before Vin's team de-escalated with firm authority and calm negotiation. Later, another encounter unfolded on a nearby block, when rival messengers approached one of Vin's drivers with veiled warnings about territory shifts. The situation's heightened suspense without crossing into violence, serving as sharp reminders of the dangers that could touch anyone Vin brought close. Each incident fueled his inner conflict, the gnawing guilt over his world's shadows clashing with his deepening resolve to create safety for his daughters and for Emily. As evening settled over the Hudson with soft October hues, the penthouse filled with a new tentative warmth. The twins laughed softly while playing with Mia, who gradually softened her stance after watching Emily's gentle patience. Mia eventually approached Vin with guarded curiosity, her small voice testing the waters. The emerging bonds felt fragile yet real between the children, between Emily and the girls, and in the quiet, protective glances Vin cast toward the woman who had brought light into their home. For Emily, the day brought violent swings of emotion, from desperate memories of cold nights to the confusing, numbing shock of sudden protection and kindness. Her guarded heart opened further with curious hope, even as old humiliations lingered. For Vin, the remorse and love tore at him with ever greater force, his passionate attachment to Emily creating a compelling focal point amid the storm. In the quiet, condensed stillness of the evening, with the city lights beginning to sparkle below, the healing continued. A powerful father's wounded heart, slowly mending through the innocent kindness surrounding his vulnerable children. The pale sunlight struggling against gathering clouds over the Manhattan skyline. In the penthouse, the fragile healing that had begun with the twins now faced new strains. Emily Harper continued her quiet work with Sophia and Isabella, her thin frame gradually gaining a touch of color from regular meals and warm nights. Yet the shadows of her past poverty lingered deeply. She remained haunted by the memory of countless cold, wind-filled nights spent huddled in doorways or on hard shelter benches, her body once so malnourished that every step had brought pain and dizziness. Even surrounded by the penthouse's increasing displays of wealth, the soft cashmere throws, the chef-prepared nourishing soups, the private rooftop garden filled with late autumn flowers, Emily often felt a humiliating wave of disbelief. She would pause in quiet moments, her voice soft and timid when addressing Mr. Ellis or the staff. "Thank you for the kindness. I still cannot quite believe it is real." The misunderstandings with Mia escalated gently but painfully over the following days. The 5-year-old girl from Brooklyn visited again, her street-smart nature clashing with the opulent environment. Mia watched Vin with guarded eyes during playtime, whispering to the twins in the playroom. "He is too powerful. Men like that in the neighborhood always have secrets. Be careful, okay?" Sophia and Isabella, still fragile in their trust, repeated the words innocently during a family scrapbooking session. The comment hung in the air, creating quiet tension that rippled through the household. Emily felt a surge of anxiety and fear, her heart racing as confusion washed over her. She sat in a moment of condensed emotional stillness by the tall windows, the city lights beginning to sparkle below, fighting a wave of dizziness and numbness that made her grip the windowsill for balance. I was once powerless on those same streets. Now I am here protected, yet old suspicions follow me. The inner tearing grew more violent. The mindset of someone lifted suddenly from utter misery into safety left her disoriented and torn between gratitude and lingering guardedness. Vin witnessed the exchange from the doorway, his powerful frame tense beneath the tailored shirt that spoke of his commanding presence. The wealth around him felt heavier than ever, the crystal chandeliers casting warm light over rooms worth fortunes, the seamless security systems, the private staff ensuring every comfort, yet his heart tore with increasing intensity. The gnawing remorse over his daughter's prolonged grief clashed violently with the burning, passionate attachment he felt toward Emily. From the very first meeting, that protective love had ignited like a flame and now burned hotter, creating a compelling focal point amid his turmoil. She has brought them laughter and words again, yet my world's shadows make even a child wary. The emotional upheaval was profound, blending fierce paternal love with self-reproach that left him numb one moment and filled with fierce resolve the next. Drama escalated later that afternoon, when another unreasonable injustice struck Emily. A letter arrived via courier from her former landlord in Brooklyn, a final demand for supposed back fees on repairs she had never authorized, threatening to garnish any future wages despite her eviction months earlier. The document was cold and bureaucratic, ignoring her polite previous appeals and the months she had endured leaking roofs and broken heating during freezing nights. Emily read it in the sitting room, her hazel eyes widening in shock and confusion. A wave of horror and anxiety crashed over her, causing deep disorientation. The room seemed to tilt as numbness spread through her limbs and pain tightened in her chest. She whispered softly and politely to the empty space, her voice timid. "Why does it never end? I have nothing left to give." Tears stung her eyes as the humiliating contrast hit her anew here in luxury, yet still pursued by the absurd cruelties of her destitute past. The violent inner torment left her feeling powerless once more, evoking a deep sympathy for the resilient woman who had given so much to others while receiving so little. Vin, informed quietly by Mr. Ellis, felt the news like a personal wound. His remorse intensified to a nearly unbearable degree, tearing at him with fresh violence. He was a wealthy, powerful man who could resolve such matters with a single call. Yet the thought of Emily's continued suffering filled him with consuming guilt and a passionate protective upheaval that burned even brighter. His attachment to her, intense and overwhelming from the start, now drove him to act discreetly, ensuring the unjust claim would be handled without her knowledge for the moment. The inner conflict raged. The father, who longed to shield his daughters from pain, now extended that fierce instinct toward the woman who had healed them. The tension rose further when reports arrived of bold street confrontations with opposing factions. In one unexpected encounter near a waterfront construction site, Marco's associates pulled alongside Vin's team in a tense standoff. Voices carried challenging questions about leadership priorities and hints of divided loyalties, the air thick with unspoken threat. Vin's men responded with calm, firm authority, de-escalating through measured words and steady presence rather than any escalation. A second confrontation unfolded later on a busy block, when rival messengers approached one of Vin's drivers, their vehicles creating a brief but charged blockade while pressing for concessions. Again, the situation resolved through controlled negotiation, but the suspense lingered like a shadow, reminding Vin how quickly his world could endanger those he sought to protect. Each incident heightened the drama, confusing and numbing his thoughts as remorse over past choices clashed with his deepening resolve. In the midst of these rising conflicts, the first shocking twist arrived with devastating suddenness. During a routine checkup for a minor scrape Sophia had sustained while playing in the garden, the pediatrician requested standard blood work as precaution. The results, delivered privately to Vin in his study that evening, brought extreme psychological shock. The DNA findings revealed a truth no one had anticipated. Sophia was biologically his daughter with Emily from a brief, vulnerable encounter years earlier, during a difficult time in both their lives. A connection Emily had never known how to reveal, fearing the dangers of his world, and raising the child in poverty alone until circumstances had drawn them together through the community program. Vin sat motionless at his massive mahogany desk, the opulent study with its rare books and glowing monitors fading into the background. The revelation tore through him with violent intensity. Remorse crashed over him like a wave, guilt for unknowingly leaving his own flesh and blood in such destitute conditions, for the cold nights and hunger Emily and Sophia had endured while he lived in unimaginable wealth. His heart ripped between overwhelming love for his daughter and the burning, passionate attachment toward Emily that now carried layers of profound responsibility and tenderness. All this time, my own child suffered in silence, and she carried that burden alone. The inner conflict was excruciating, numbing him with shock and confusion, before violently tearing at his soul with fierce determination to make amends and protect them both completely. Emily learned of the results in a private, gentle conversation with Vin later that evening. She stood in the softly lit sitting room, her thin hands trembling as dizziness and deep disorientation washed over her. Horror and anxiety mingled with heightened curiosity and a confusing surge of fear. Her voice came out soft and timid, polite, even in shock. I never meant to hide it. I was so scared for us. The mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly enveloped in protection and truth, left her emotionally overwhelmed, tears falling, as the violent inner world tore between relief and lingering guardedness. Vin's response was measured yet raw with emotion. He assured her quietly of his unwavering support, his blue eyes reflecting the profound upheaval within. The attachment he felt toward her burned with even greater passion and intensity, a protective love that had begun at their first meeting, and now deepened into something unbreakable. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed the revelation, with the October night settling over the Hudson, both characters stood at a new threshold. Misunderstandings with Mia lingered, street tensions with rival factions continued to simmer, and the unfair blows of Emily's past still echoed. Yet the shocking truth had forged a stronger bond, centered on the healing of a powerful father's wounded heart through the innocent needs and kindness of his vulnerable children. The inner tearing continued to grow for all, a profound and moving reminder that even in luxury, the heart's deepest conflicts demand compassion, responsibility, and quiet courage. October 2025 drew toward its close with shorter days and a persistent autumn chill that seemed to mirror the fragile balance inside the Manhattan penthouse. The revelation about Sophia had shifted everything, yet the healing continued in tender, incremental steps. Emily Harper spent quiet afternoons with the twins, her once painfully thin frame now showing faint signs of nourishment from consistent meals and rest. Still, the memory of her absolute poverty lingered like a shadow. The many cold, wind-filled nights spent shivering in doorways, the humiliating lines at food banks that often ended in disappointment, the sleep deprivation that had left her, dizzy and unsteady for months, even surrounded by the penthouse's growing displays of wealth, the heated floors, the soft cashmere blankets draped over elegant sofas, the private chef's nourishing soups and fresh apple pies. Emily occasionally felt a deep wave of disorientation. She would pause in the hallway, her voice soft and timid when speaking to Mr. Ellis. "Thank you again. It still feels like a dream I am afraid to wake from." The twins responded to her presence with increasing openness. Sophia, the biological daughter whose truth had now been revealed, often climbed into Emily's lap during story time, clutching the old baseball glove like a talisman of safety. Isabella followed closely, their shared laughter during simple games of catch on the rooftop garden growing warmer each day. Mia's visits continued, her initial distrust slowly easing as she witnessed Emily's gentle patience and Vin's quiet efforts to include her. The children's innocent kindness began to chip away at the heavier layers of grief, creating moments of condensed emotional stillness where the playroom filled with soft giggles instead of silence or destruction. Vin moved through these days like a man walking between two worlds. His powerful presence commanded the opulent space, the crystal chandeliers casting golden light over rooms filled with valuable art, the private study overlooking the Hudson, and the seamless security that protected everything he held dear. Yet his inner world was in turmoil. The gnawing remorse over unknowingly leaving Sophia in poverty tore at him with violent intensity. Every time he saw Emily's lingering fragility or heard the twins' tentative laughter, the guilt deepened into a consuming ache. "I had a daughter suffering in the cold while I sat in warmth and power. How can I ever make that right?" This remorse clashed fiercely with the burning, passionate attachment he felt toward Emily, an overwhelming protective love that had ignited from their very first meeting and now blazed with even greater force. After the revelation, the emotional upheaval created a compelling focal point, fierce paternal devotion mixed with a profound tenderness toward the woman who had carried his child through hardship alone. The inner conflict left him numb in quiet moments, then violently tearing at his heart with self-reproach and fierce resolve to protect them all. The drama escalated one crisp afternoon when reports arrived of heightened tensions with opposing factions. In a bold and unexpected street confrontation near a Brooklyn construction site, Marco's associates appeared suddenly, their vehicles pulling alongside Vin's team in a tense standoff. Voices rose in challenging but controlled tones, questioning Vin's focus and hinting at shifting alliances. Vin's men responded with firm authority and calm negotiation, de-escalating the situation without any physical escalation, yet the air remained thick with suspense. A second encounter unfolded later the same day, on a busy Manhattan block, where rival messengers blocked a delivery route briefly, their words carrying veiled threats about loyalty and territory. Again, the confrontation resolved through steady presence and measured dialogue, but the incidents left Vin with a sharper sense of vulnerability, his world's shadows threatening to touch the fragile healing happening upstairs. That evening, the life-threatening drama unfolded with shocking suddenness. Vin had stepped out briefly for a scheduled meeting when an ambush occurred on a quiet side street. Marco's faction, growing bolder, orchestrated a calculated confrontation. Several men approached Vin's vehicle in a tense blockade, their voices rising in aggressive demands for greater control and accusations of weakness. The situation escalated rapidly into a dangerous standoff. Gunshots rang out, not from Vin's side, but from the aggressors attempting to intimidate. One bullet struck Vin's shoulder in a graze that sent searing pain through his body. Chaos erupted as his security team moved to protect him, de-escalating with precise, non-lethal force, while calling for immediate help. Emily was in the penthouse with the children when the urgent call came. The news hit her like a physical blow. Horror and anxiety surged through her, causing deep disorientation. The luxurious room tilted as dizziness overwhelmed her malnourished frame, still not fully recovered from years of hardship. She nearly lost her balance, gripping a chair as numbness spread through her limbs and pain tightened in her chest. Her voice emerged soft and timid when she spoke to Mr. Ellis. "Please, tell me he is all right." The unfairness felt crushing, lifted from cold streets into safety, only to face the terror of losing the protection that had begun to heal them all. The violent inner torment tore at her, confusing and numbing, reflecting the mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly dependent on a powerful man's survival. The children sensed the tension. Sophia, clutching her stuffed eagle, whispered, "Is Appa hurt?" Their innocent worry added another layer to the emotional storm. Vin was rushed back to the penthouse under tight security rather than a hospital, to avoid drawing further attention. A private doctor tended to the graze wound in the study, bandaging it carefully while assuring it was not life-threatening but required rest. Vin sat in the leather armchair, his fair-skinned face pale blood staining his torn shirt. The pain was sharp, but the deeper agony was emotional. The remorse crashed over him with violent force. "My choices brought danger to our door. Sophia and Isabella could have lost me too." The inner tearing intensified to an excruciating degree, blending consuming guilt with the burning attachment toward Emily that now felt even more urgent and protective. When Emily entered the study with the children trailing anxiously behind her, the scene deepened the healing in unexpected ways. Sophia and Isabella approached their father with wide eyes. In a poignant moment, they offered him handmade drawings, colorful pictures of Daddy, strong and smiling. Sophia carefully placed a colorful bandage from her own small first aid kit over the doctor's professional wrapping, whispering, "Broken things still get hugs." Isabella added her own gentle pat on his uninjured arm. Mia, who had been visiting, watched the entire scene unfold. Her earlier distrust melted into quiet awe as she saw Vin shield the children from any further worry despite his pain. The emotional turning point for Mia was profound. She stepped forward hesitantly and said softly, "You are not scary. You are trying to be good for them." Vin's heart cracked open. The innocent kindness of the children, especially Sophia's tender care, delivered a powerful message of healing. Tears he could no longer contain slipped down his cheeks as he gathered the girls close with his good arm. The second shocking twist landed in this vulnerable moment during the doctor's final check. Additional tests confirmed the graze had come dangerously close to a major artery. Had the angle been slightly different, the wound could have been fatal. The realization struck Vin with extreme psychological shock, numbing him completely before violently tearing through his soul with fresh remorse and gratitude. "I came so close to leaving them again." His passionate attachment to Emily surged with overwhelming intensity, a deep protective love that had burned from their first meeting, and now demanded he choose family over the dangers of his empire with even greater conviction. Emily stood nearby, her own emotions in chaos. The sight of Vin wounded, yet receiving such pure care from the children, filled her with a confusing mix of fear, relief, and heightened curiosity about the future. The disparity remained stark, her past of cold, humiliating nights versus the wealth that had saved him through private medical care. Yet, in this condensed emotional stillness, as the children's kindness bridged the gap, she felt her guarded heart open further. Her voice remained soft and polite when she spoke to Vin. "They need you. We all do." The inner world of both adults tore violently, remorse, love, shock, and hope, clashing in a profound, moving storm. As the October night deepened outside the tall windows, the penthouse settled into a fragile calm. The life-threatening drama and the second shocking twist had forced a reckoning. Vin's emotional wounds began to heal through the innocent actions of the children. while Emily's presence continued to symbolize quiet compassion against the backdrop of danger. The father-child bond deepened dramatically, centered on protection responsibility, and the pure kindness that could mend even the hardest heart. The inner tearing continued to grow, but so did the light of healing, a powerful reminder that compassion could triumph amid Shadow's unfair hardships and the complex emotions of a family finding its way. The autumn leaves drifting past the tall windows of the Manhattan penthouse like gentle reminders of time passing. Inside the opulent home where crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light over marble floors and valuable art, the atmosphere had shifted toward a deeper, more intimate healing. Emily Harper continued to move through the days with quiet grace, her once painfully thin and malnourished frame now showing clearer signs of recovery from regular nourishing meals and restful nights. Yet the scars of her absolute poverty remained vivid in her heart. The many cold, wind-filled nights spent shivering in doorways or on hard shelter benches, the humiliating rejection from food banks and landlords, the sleep deprivation that had left her dizzy and unsteady for so long. Even now, surrounded by increasing displays of wealth, the soft cashmere blankets, the private chefs comforting apple pies and warm soups, the rooftop garden bathed in soft afternoon light, Emily sometimes paused in condensed emotional stillness, her voice soft and timid when addressing Mr. Ellis or the staff. "Thank you. Every kindness still feels like a gift I do not deserve." The father-child bond between Vin and his daughters, especially Sophia, had intensified dramatically in the wake of the wounding and the revelations. Sophia, the biological daughter whose truth had come to light, became a constant, gentle presence at her father's side during his recovery. She would climb carefully onto the edge of his chair, placing small, colorful drawings on his lap and whispering, "Daddy, broken things still get hugs." Isabella stayed close too, the twins taking turns reading simple American bedtime stories from classic books like The Giving Tree, their small voices filling the study with tentative warmth. Mia, whose distrust had softened, joined them more freely, adding her own innocent observations that helped bridge the remaining gaps. These moments created profound emotional stillness, where the once chaotic playroom echoed with soft laughter and the rustle of scrapbook pages being filled with family memories. Vin sat in the leather armchair of his study, his shoulders still bandaged from the graze, wound his powerful frame, humbled by both physical pain and deeper emotional layers. The wealth around him felt heavier than ever, the massive mahogany desk, the rare books lining the walls, the seamless security that protected his empire. Yet his inner world was in greater turmoil than before. The gnawing remorse over the years Sophia had spent in poverty tore at him with violent intensity. Every time the little girl offered him a drawing or a careful hug, the guilt crashed over him like a wave, leaving him numb and breathless. "I missed so much. My own daughter endured hunger and cold while I built an empire of power and wealth." This remorse blended fiercely with the burning, passionate attachment he felt toward Emily, an overwhelming protective love that had ignited from their very first meeting and now burned with even greater force. The emotional upheaval created a compelling focal point, fierce paternal devotion mixed with profound tenderness and responsibility toward the woman who had carried his child through hardship alone. The inner conflict raged, tearing at his heart with self-reproach and a fierce resolve to transform for their sake. One afternoon, another absurdly unfair event struck Emily, escalating the drama in her inner world. A final notice arrived from her former school district, coldly informing her that her last paycheck had been withheld due to a new bureaucratic review despite months of dedicated service helping grieving children. The letter ignored her polite previous appeals and the reality of her destitute situation. Emily read it in the sitting room, her hazel eyes filling with shock and confusion. A wave of horror and anxiety washed over her, causing deep disorientation. The luxurious room seemed to spin as dizziness overwhelmed her still recovering frame, numbness spreading through her limbs and pain tightening in her chest. She whispered softly and politely to the empty space, her voice timid. "Why does the past keep reaching for me?" The violent inner torment left her feeling powerless once more, the humiliating contrast between her cold, wind-swept nights and the current safety tearing at her with confusing, numbing force. Tears fell quietly as she reflected on the mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly protected and valued. Vin, informed discreetly, felt the news like a fresh wound to his own heart. His remorse intensified to an excruciating degree, clashing violently with the passionate attachment toward Emily that demanded he shield her from any further suffering. He made quiet arrangements to resolve the issue through his channels, keeping his involvement hidden for now, but the act only deepened his internal transformation. He began spending more intentional time with the children, learning to play gentle catch with the old baseball glove in the garden, and reading stories with them each evening. Sophia's innocent messages of healing, a taped-together family photo, a drawing of Daddy smiling again, or her insistence on tooth fairy visits for lost teeth repeatedly cracked his hardened exterior. Each small act from his daughter carried a profound message: broken things can still be loved and healed. Street tensions with opposing factions continued to simmer, adding layers of suspense. In one bold and unexpected confrontation near a waterfront warehouse, Marco's associates appeared suddenly, their vehicles creating a tense blockade while voices rose in challenging but controlled questions about Vin's priorities and leadership. Vin's team responded with firm authority and calm negotiation, de-escalating the situation without escalation. A second encounter unfolded on a busy block, when rival messengers approached one of Vin's drivers, hinting at shifting loyalties in measured but threatening tones. Again, the standoff resolved through steady presence, but each incident reminded Vin of the dangers that could touch his family, heightening his resolve to change. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness of the evenings, Vin would sit with Sophia curled against his uninjured side. The little girl would trace the bandage gently and whisper, "You are not broken anymore, Daddy." These words struck Vin with extreme psychological shock, each time violently tearing through his remorse and leaving him overwhelmed with love and gratitude. His internal transformation deepened. The powerful mafia boss who had once buried himself in deals and power now felt the fierce pull toward a different path, one centered on protection, responsibility, and the pure kindness of his vulnerable children. The burning attachment toward Emily grew even more intense, a passionate force that made him see her not only as the woman who had healed his daughters, but as a symbol of resilience and compassion he wanted to safeguard forever. Emily watched these interactions with a mix of fear-heightened curiosity and deepening trust. The disparity between her past misery and the current protection still caused moments of numb disorientation and violent inner conflict, but she also felt a quiet hope blooming. Her soft, polite voice when speaking to Vin carried new warmth, reflecting the profound emotional shift happening within her guarded heart. As the October light faded into early evening glow across the Hudson, the father-child bond had intensified into something unbreakable. Sophia's innocent kindness served as the main messenger of healing, repeatedly pulling Vin back from the edges of his remorse and guiding his internal transformation. The once feared man felt his emotional wounds slowly mending through the pure hearts of his children, while the woman he had brought into their lives continued to embody the compassion that made it all possible. The inner tearing remained fierce, but it now carried threads of hope and redemption. In the profound stillness of the penthouse, a powerful father was learning that true strength lay not in empire, but in the gentle hands and loving words of the vulnerable children he vowed to protect and raise as his own. A transformation, born from compassion, responsibility, and the deep emotional solidity, healing that only genuine connection could bring. In the penthouse high above the city, the healing that had taken root now faced its most severe trial. Emily Harper moved through the elegant rooms with a grace born of growing trust, her once painfully thin and malnourished frame continuing to recover under the care of regular meals and safe shelter. Yet the memory of her absolute poverty remained a deep, humiliating wound. The endless cold, wind-filled nights huddled in doorways or on shelter benches, the sleep deprivation that had left her dizzy and weak, the absurdly unfair rejections from landlords and assistance programs that had stripped her of dignity. Even now, surrounded by the penthouse's increasing displays of wealth, the crystal chandeliers casting soft light over marble floors, the chef-prepared nourishing meals, the soft blankets and private rooftop garden, Emily sometimes felt a wave of deep disorientation. She would pause in quiet corners, her voice soft and timid, when addressing Mr. Ellis. "Thank you. I still wake up afraid it will all disappear." The father-child bond had grown even stronger in recent days. Sophia, the biological daughter whose truth had been revealed, stayed especially close to Vin, offering small, innocent messages of healing, a carefully taped family photo, a drawing of Daddy strong again, or gentle hugs that whispered, "You are not broken anymore." Isabella and Mia joined these tender moments, the children's pure kindness slowly mending the fractures in Vin's heart. These interactions created profound, condensed emotional stillness, where the once chaotic space filled with soft voices and the rustle of scrapbook pages. Vin sat in his study, his shoulder still bandaged his powerful frame, a study in restrained strength. The wealth around him felt almost suffocating in its contrast to the emotional storm inside the rare books, the gleaming desk, the seamless security that protected his empire. His inner torment had intensified to a nearly unbearable level. The gnawing remorse over Sophia's years of poverty tore at him, violently blending with consuming guilt for the dangers his world continued to bring. "I nearly lost everything because of choices I made long ago," This remorse clashed fiercely with the burning, passionate attachment he felt toward Emily, an overwhelming protective love that had ignited from their very first meeting and now burned hotter than ever. The emotional upheaval created a compelling focal point, fierce paternal devotion mixed with profound tenderness and responsibility toward the woman who had brought light and healing into their lives. The violent inner conflict left him numb one moment and ripped through him with fresh pain the next. The drama escalated sharply when betrayal from within struck with shocking force. Late one afternoon, as the October light faded, Marco Vin's ambitious underboss launched his final calculated move. He had long suspected the deeper connections within the household, and saw the growing softness as weakness that threatened his own ambitions. In a bold and unexpected betrayal, Marco orchestrated the kidnapping of Mia and Isabella. The girls had been on a supervised short outing to a nearby safe park with security, when Marco's men struck not with overt violence but through a tense, deceptive maneuver that separated the children from their escort using coordinated vehicles and misleading communications. The girls were taken to a secluded location, frightened but unharmed, held as leverage to force Vin into a deadly alliance and to expose what Marco believed was Vin's divided focus. When the news reached the penthouse, it struck like a thunderclap. Emily felt horror and anxiety crash over her with violent intensity. Dizziness overwhelmed her, causing deep disorientation and numbness in her limbs. She nearly lost her balance, gripping the back of a chair as pain tightened in her chest. The unfairness felt crushing, lifted from cold, humiliating streets into protection, only to face the terror of losing the children she had come to love. Her voice emerged soft and timid when she spoke to Vin. "Please, bring them home safely." The inner tearing was excruciating, reflecting the mindset of someone once desperately poor, now suddenly enveloped in love and safety, yet watching it all threatened. Shock and confusion tore at her, violently numbing her spirit, while fear for the innocent girls ripped through her heart. Vin's reaction was immediate and raw. The revelation that Marco had suspected Sophia's parentage and used the situation to manipulate events sent extreme psychological shock through him. His remorse exploded into a violent storm, guilt for the shadows he had allowed to linger, for the danger now touching the most vulnerable. "My own ambition and past choices have put them in harm's way." The inner conflict raged with greater force than ever, tearing between the powerful man who had built an empire and the father who would burn it all down to save his children. His passionate attachment toward Emily surged with overwhelming intensity, a deep protective love that demanded he end the threat once and for all. In that moment of condensed emotional stillness before action, Vin made his choice clear: family above empire. The rescue operation unfolded with tense urgency but without excessive force. Vin coordinated with his most loyal men, approaching the location through careful negotiation and strategic presence rather than open confrontation. Street-level tensions peaked in several bold, unexpected moments. Marco's men blocking key routes with vehicles, voices rising in challenging tones about loyalty and power, only to be met with firm, controlled authority that de-escalated each standoff. The suspense built layer by layer, the air thick with the weight of what was at stake. In the most shocking and poignant twist of the crisis, Sophia, the main child whose innocent kindness had carried the healing message throughout, played the pivotal role. During a brief moment when she and Mia were held in a room with Marco, the little girl frightened but guided by the pure heart that had healed, her father offered him a handmade scrapbook page from her bag. With wide, innocent eyes, she said softly, "Even bad guys can get hugs if they stop being mean." My daddy learned that. The unexpected act of childlike kindness momentarily disarmed Marco's rage. His hardened expression faltered, creating the exact split-second Vin's team needed to safely intervene and resolve the situation through decisive yet measured action. The girls were returned unharmed. The betrayal ended without further harm. Vin gathered Sophia, Isabella, and Mia into his arms the moment they were safe, his bandaged shoulder forgotten in the rush of relief and love. The emotional upheaval reached its peak. Tears streamed down his face as Sophia whispered again, "You saved us, Daddy." The remorse, guilt, and passionate attachment toward Emily and the children tore through him with violent intensity, but this time the pain carried transformation. He realized fully how deeply the children, especially Sophia's pure messages of healing, had already changed him. The mindset of watching his own vulnerable child offer kindness in danger created extreme psychological shock, numbing him before violently ripping open his heart to the truth. True strength lay in compassion, not power. Emily stood nearby, her own inner world in chaos. The fear and anxiety for the children had left her disoriented and numb, yet witnessing Vin's fierce protection and the children's bravery filled her with overwhelming trust and attachment. The disparity between her past misery and this moment of safety still caused deep-moving conflict, but hope now shone brighter. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness that followed with the October night settling peacefully over the Hudson, Vin held his daughters close. The bold betrayal and shocking twist had forced the ultimate test, pushing the inner tearing to its greatest intensity. Yet through it all, the father-child bond had been forged in fire. A powerful man's heart healing through the innocent kindness of the vulnerable children. He now vowed to protect and raise as his own, forever guided by the compassion that had saved them all. The transformation was underway, deep and genuine. As the family stood together against the shadows, their bonds stronger than any empire. October 2025 came to a gentle close, wrapping the city in a final reflective hush as the last autumn leaves drifted past the tall windows of the Manhattan penthouse. The days following the betrayal and rescue brought a profound shift, one that touched every heart within the opulent home. Emily Harper walked through the sunlit rooms with a quiet strength that had grown from the ashes of her former life. Her body, once painfully thin and deprived of food, deprived of sleep, and battered by countless cold, wind-filled nights on unforgiving streets, now carried the soft signs of nourishment and rest. Yet the memory of that absolute poverty remained a deeply pitiful and humiliating shadow. The endless lines at depleted food banks, the landlord's unjust lock changes, the dizzying waves of hunger and exhaustion that had left her, powerless and alone. Even surrounded by the penthouse's ever-increasing displays of wealth, the crystal chandeliers glowing warmly overhead, the marble floors heated against the chill, the chef's carefully prepared meals, and the private garden filled with late-blooming flowers. Emily sometimes paused in condensed emotional stillness. Her voice would drop to a soft, timid whisper when addressing Mr. Ellis or the staff. "Thank you. Every moment of safety still feels like a miracle I once believed I did not deserve." The father-child bond had become the quiet heartbeat of the household. Sophia, the biological daughter whose innocent kindness had carried the healing message from the beginning, remained especially close to Vin. She would climb into his lap with her worn stuffed eagle and whisper simple truths that cracked open his guarded heart wider each time. Isabella and Mia stayed near as well, the three children filling the once silent spaces with gentle laughter, shared stories from classic American books and colorful scrapbook pages that captured their growing sense of family. These moments created deep, moving stillness where the weight of past pain slowly lifted, replaced by the warmth of chosen connection. Vin stood at the center of this transformation, his powerful frame no longer defined solely by the empire he had built. The wealth around him continued to shine with intensity, the rare books lining the study walls, the seamless security systems, the elegant furnishings that spoke of success few could imagine. Yet his inner world churned with increasing intensity. The gnawing remorse over the years of hardship Sophia and Emily had endured tore at him violently, blending with consuming guilt for the dangers his choices had invited into their lives. "I built walls of power to protect them, yet those same walls nearly cost me everything that truly matters." This remorse clashed fiercely with the passionate, burning attachment he felt toward Emily, an overwhelming surge of protective love that had ignited from their very first meeting and now blazed with profound depth. The emotional upheaval created a compelling focal point. Fierce paternal devotion intertwined with a deep humanistic tenderness toward the woman who had shown him that compassion could bridge any divide, regardless of skin color or the vast gulf between wealth and poverty. The violent inner conflict left him numb in quiet moments, then ripped through his heart with fresh pain and an urgent desire to choose a different path. In the days that followed the rescue, several tense street confrontations with opposing factions tested Vin's resolve. Marco's remaining influence sparked bold, unexpected encounters near construction sites and waterfront locations. Vehicles would appear suddenly, voices rising in challenging but controlled tones about loyalty and shifting power, only to be met with firm, measured authority from Vin's loyal team. Each standoff heightened suspense without crossing into harm, serving as sharp reminders of the world Vin was determined to leave behind. These moments escalated the drama, confusing and numbing his thoughts before violently tearing at his inner world, forcing him to confront how wealth and power could never replace the simple healing presence of family. One final unreasonable injustice struck Emily during this period, exposing the lingering threads of her past misery. A cold letter from a former agency claimed she owed fees for services she had never received, threatening further complications despite her years of quiet service to underprivileged children. The notice arrived without warning, ignoring her polite previous appeals and the reality of her once destitute circumstances. Emily read it in the sitting room, shock and confusion washing over her in waves. Dizziness returned, causing deep disorientation and a painful tightness in her chest as numbness spread through her limbs. She whispered softly and politely to the empty air, her voice timid, "Why must the past keep pulling me back?" The violent inner torment left her feeling momentarily powerless again, evoking deep sympathy for the resilient woman who had endured so much humiliation only to rise through compassion. The contrast with the penthouse's luxury made the moment even more moving, highlighting how wealth and poverty could never truly separate genuine love and human connection. Vin, witnessing her quiet distress, felt his remorse surge to a new peak. The inner tearing grew increasingly intense, a violent storm of guilt and love that ultimately guided his final decision. He chose to step away from the most dangerous aspects of his former life, dismantling risky operations and focusing instead on legitimate construction work that could provide stability without shadows. This internal transformation was profound and deeply moving, the once feared man now guided by the innocent kindness of his children and the quiet strength of Emily. In the quiet, condensed emotional stillness of a simple backyard gathering at their new safer home just outside the city, the family came together for a modest celebration. String lights twinkled overhead as they shared pizza and apple pie, the children laughing while adding final pages to their family scrapbook. Sophia climbed into Vin's arms and whispered, "Daddy, you learned that love is stronger than anything." In that moment, the powerful father felt the last layers of his remorse ease, replaced by a deep sense of peace and purpose. He looked at Emily with profound gratitude, his passionate attachment now, a steady, protective flame that honored the truth that compassion and love could transcend any background, any difference in skin color, or any divide created by wealth and poverty. From every situation in their journey, one clear lesson emerged. True knowledge comes when we open our hearts to those who have suffered silently. Another valuable lesson is that real strength grows from choosing kindness over control. The greatest education lies in understanding that every child's innocent heart can teach us more than any empire ever could. A quiet lesson reveals itself when we realize that protection means creating safety for the vulnerable rather than hiding behind power. Ultimately, the deepest knowledge we gain is that compassion heals what money alone cannot touch. Through this experience, another important lesson teaches us that family is built through presence and care, not blood or status. The most meaningful education happens when we learn that love, regardless of skin color or circumstance, creates bonds nothing can break. One final lesson shines brightly healing begins the moment we choose humanity over fear. And the truest knowledge arrives when we see that every act of gentleness plants seeds of lasting change. As the evening light faded into peaceful darkness, Vin held his daughters close and spoke softly to Emily, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that wealth means nothing without the hearts we protect. Thank you for helping me become the father they deserve." The children gathered in a warm family embraced their laughter, rising like a promise of brighter days ahead. To everyone watching this video, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. Thank you for joining this heartfelt journey. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with others so we can enjoy many engaging videos every day. How did this story make you feel? In what ways does it connect to real life for you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. The creator truly wants to listen to the emotions from deep within your hearts. Goodbye for now, and I promise to see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.